It was a terrible mistake, a terrible, terrible waste, and only now can the true story be told. It began as a mercy mission, an Australian Navy team overseas saving lives after the tsunami. It ended a year ago today when their Sea King helicopter crashed and burst into flames on the Indonesian island of Nias. It was the Navy's worst ever air disaster. Only 2 of the crew survived, and tonight, for the first time, one of them speaks out. A dramatic story of the last flight of Sea King Shark 2. And there's also damning evidence why this was no accident. Evidence that the Navy failed its most precious assets, the men and women of Shark 2.
Certainly after the crash and after I came to, I felt that there was a possibility that I might die here, so I think that definitely kicked me into gear. There's no way I wanted to die in a helicopter 8,000 kilometres from my home, so I just didn't want to die there.
7 young men and 2 young women did die when this Australian Sea King helicopter crashed and exploded on the faraway Indonesian island of Nias. By some miracle, 2 men survived. Leading seaman Shane Warburton was one of them.
Even to this day, I can clearly recall the sound. It plays over and over in my head. The sound of the crash, over and over and over again. So I'll never forget it.
It was more than 6 hours after the crash and well past the midnight hour when the Defence Department dispatched their messengers of death. And across Australia, Navy chaplains delivered news that no family deserves to hear.
Yeah, as soon as I arrived, I heard the door. I knew what it was, because you don't get visitors at 2 o'clock in the morning.
I realised it was a Navy chaplain in whites and
The
screamed
world
at him
fell
to go
apart.
away.
A Canberra boy, Lieutenant Paul Kimlin, was Ray and Carol's only son. His co-pilot on Shark 2, the Sea King chopper, was Lieutenant Jonathan King. Back in Queensland that night, his father Rod was hoping against hope.
I mean, somebody loses somebody every day, and I mean, until it happens to yourself, yeah, there is no book could be written on it, and nothing could prepare you for it.
In Sydney, it was 2:45 in the morning when the Navy chaplain finally got to Matt Goodall's parents.
Yeah. Christine collapsed at the front door.
I just said,
and she
you've
said,
got the wrong house.
Please
go
tell
away.
me you've got the wrong house. And they said, no, unfortunately, we haven't got the wrong house.
Yes.
And I saw them standing there, and I just told them, not in a very polite way, that they couldn't enter our house. But they did. So, there we go.
In the Navy's stronghold of Jarvis Bay,
So which one are you
Taryn Bennett copped a double dose. She'd lost her husband Scotty, and then she had to tell their 2 little boys.
I had to tell them. And then young Courtney, ever so proud of his dad, he said, no, Mum, my dad got out and he walked away.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, wishful thinking.
These men see the works of the Lord. These men see.
There's no question, this was the Australian Navy's worst air disaster. It was a national tragedy. 9 young doctors and pilots, medics and aircrew. They were the best and the brightest. Now, just a few weeks before they died, I was privileged to fly with these blokes in their chopper. They were in Aceh on a tsunami mercy mission. It was a landscape of devastation and total despair, into which these Australians delivered some hope.
It's still really, really hard to put all the pieces together in your head, you know. Like the size of the wave that came through, you know, it's just unfathomable.
Scotty Bennett was a leading seaman. He led the Sea King in its critical takeoff and landing manoeuvres. Up front were pilots Paul Kimlin and Jonathan King.
He just loved Sea Kings. He thought they were the big Mack trucks, you know, they were pretty ugly, they were utility, and, you know, I thought he would have liked the Seahawks or something more modern. No, he wanted the Sea King.
Did Paul always want to fly?
Oh yes, he did, yeah, right from a very early age. He was flying solo before he got the licence to drive a car.
We actually had to convince him to get his car licence. Yeah, he was quite happy just let somebody else drive and he'd fly.
Now, this was the same crew that showed the Prime Minister where Australia's $1 billion in aid money needed to be spent. Just hours after Mr Howard's safe return, Shark 2 went in for routine repairs. The mechanics stripped down the flight control system. Believe it or not, this is what caused the terrible tragedy. This tiny split pin at the end of a bolt to keep that nut on. And the bolt goes in there. It's a bit like the steering column of a car. What we now know is that the mechanic made a mistake. Either he didn't put the split pin in, or else he put it in incorrectly. Either way, the bolt fell out of there, and the chopper fell out of the sky, out of control.
If things had been done correctly, Shark 02 probably would still be flying now. There's no reason why it wouldn't be flying.
Which makes the death senseless.
Yes, absolutely.
And preventable, totally preventable. Those 9 talented, dedicated people would still be alive doing their job.
Well, do you consider was it an accident?
I believe it's totally preventable, and I don't refer to it as an accident, I refer to it as a tragedy.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel very angry. I just can't understand when they know that there's a faulty part, why it's not checked on a much more regular basis.
Did the Navy shortchange these 9 people who died when it came to safety?
Look, that's exactly what the Board of Inquiry is looking at. The Board of Inquiry is investigating what happened and why and how it happened.
The Navy's integrity is on the line. Is your integrity on the line too?
Absolutely. My integrity is on the line, Ray. I know that.
Now, it seems there's no need for a whistleblower in this man's Navy. Rear Admiral David Thomas says that the Naval Inquiry will find out exactly what went wrong. But do you accept that human error was involved, that someone made a mistake?
Look, that's exactly what the Board of Inquiry is looking into, Ray. I can't prejudge that. It would be wrong of me to do so.
The family say to us that they expect truth and justice. Will they get it?
Ray, I want to know what happened. It's in my interests, it's in the Navy's interest to know what happened.
This Board of Inquiry was supposed to run for 6 weeks. It's now lasted for 6 months. And day after day, grieving families have heard damning evidence about sloppy mechanics and about safety problems with the Sea King that the Navy had ignored for years until the crash.
They were responsible for looking after my son. And not only did they give him substandard equipment to fly in, they were not overseeing the maintenance section or giving them enough money or, access to parts and things like that. At every level, I've been disappointed.
He's been let down by the organisation that he loved and was willing to, probably be there, the rest of his working life. And I think that's just the terrible thing.
I can understand their anger, I can understand their anguish, I can understand their frustration, I can understand that they don't forgive us for that. I really can. What I want to be able to say to them is that I will do the very best I can that this never occurs again.
So the chopper's gone from horizontal to vertical.
Yeah, in less than a second.
It was so quick, I know, but was there time for anyone to say anything?
I do definitely remember someone saying, "Oh shit."
A year later, the families can't forget that day. But Shane Warburton is only just remembering what happened. For the first time, he tells an extraordinary story of survival and of heroism.
I heard a noise of somebody towards the rear of the helicopter. I came across a few people on the way. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do for them, although I tried, but...
Were you conscious at that stage that it might be too late to help the others?
Basically, the person I was trying to help died in front of me. I just thought, I can't stay here, and I kept moving to where I heard the other person, and that was when I found Scott Nichols, so dragged Scott out the back of the helicopter.
So the only good news in this story of disaster is that Scott Nichols and Shane survived. The saddest news for everyone else was the coroner's report. He concluded that there were other survivors on board Shark 2, that people were still alive after the crash.
Some of the people had survived the crash. So there were still people alive in the helicopter.
Do you know about Matt?
Yes.
Which indicates that he was one of the 4 who may have survived.
Yes, he survived the crash.
He survived the crash, and in fact we know he got out of his seat. I mean, he had a particular harness type on which had to be undone.
He had a 5-point harness.
Yep. And we know he survived the crash.
And then he was either overcome by his injuries or the fire.
Yeah.
But if the villagers, it was in evidence that the villagers had actually heard people calling from the helicopter.
Yeah, for help from the wreckage, from inside the wreckage.
And if the butane hadn't started to go off, they might have been able to save them, because at that stage the fire was only quite small.
Now, incredibly, bottles of explosive butane gas were loaded onto Shark 2 by an Australian aid worker. Frank Tyler, who's seen here, says he didn't know that his cargo contained any butane. But once the chopper crashed, that gas became a deadly time bomb.
We also know that from Paul being so conscious of safety, if he knew that there were dangerous goods on that aircraft, and he was the captain on the day, he wouldn't have allowed them to be there.
Certainly did stop them going back in to look for more. Personally, for us, no, we can say that that would not have helped Jonathan. But who knows with some of the others.
Did you hear the butane go off?
I heard an explosion. I couldn't tell you what that explosion was, but that was the only explosion that I can recall was after I was out of the helicopter. And the fire had well and truly taken hold of the aircraft by that stage. But I don't know if it was butane, fuel or oil. So,
Go. Good kick, sweetie.
With a broken arm, a badly damaged shoulder, and with the chopper on fire, Shane says in his dazed state, all he could think about was his wife and family back in Canberra and his dying mates back in the chopper.
I remember trying to stand up after I got out of the helicopter and asking them to take Scott away. At that stage, I was going to actually go back into it to help more people, but I believe I collapsed at that stage, and the next time I woke up and can remember anything is lying next to Scott Nichols on the grass, and that's when the helicopter exploded.
But the instinct was go back in and help.
That's right, and I'm sure they would have done the same thing if it was those guys that were out and I was still in there. They would have I believe they would have tried to go back in. So that's just what you do for your mates.
It was handed down to him from his grandma, I believe, and he wore it religiously every day. And
What, around his neck?
yeah.
Scotty Bennett's jade carving was the only personal relic to survive the fire. It's now Terren's talisman. She keeps it with her for comfort and for strength. The strength she now needs to raise her boys alone.
Over at that rock then and thought it was a seal. Can you see it?
Oh no, that's an iPhone.
How about you? How's Mum coping?
She's built a brick wall. Pretty high and pretty strong. And I mean, the reality of it all really hasn't hit home yet.
A year later, and it hasn't hit home.
And she's scared to let it hit home. It's easier to think that Scott's away.
Even to this day, I wake up some days and I still expect Friday afternoon Maddie's going to walk through the front door.
For the families of the 9 who died in Nias and the 2 who survived, it's been one hell of a year. Today is the anniversary of that terrible crash. And courtesy of the Navy, the families have made the painful pilgrimage back to the village.
Oh, beautiful boy.
Maybe it'll provide some sort of contact for me with Paul. I don't know.
Yes.
But I need to know where he had his last conscious moments.
I have to visit the site. I really just feel I have to visit the site.
More so just to see the friendly smiles on the locals' faces that Scotty saw when he was waving to them. That's where I want to go, just to see that.
Those people, I have immense pride in those that we lost. I'm very proud of what they did. I'm very proud of what they did for their country. And I see them as heroes.
Just sorry, I suppose, that they're not here to talk about it as well. They're not here to help more people like they went over there to do to start with. You know, that's all we were over there to do, was help people, and unfortunately it ended in this tragedy.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au, as well as the 9Now app.